If you mix songs with drums and bass and you don't get the balance right between the kick drum and the bass guitar, your mix will have an unstable, unsatisfying low end. Most advice out there is overly complicated. It's not about carving out space, and it's not even about sidechaining either. It's simpler than that. I'll show you how. By the end of this video, you can feel confident in your ability to nail the low end every time. Hey, my name is Gilder. I've been coaching musicians since 2009. And one of the common themes that I hear when I do critiques from my members is this imbalance between kick and bass. They're not really playing on the same team. So the first thing I want you to do is rethink the way you think about kick, drum, and bass in your mix. Here's what I'm talking about. If this is your mix from low to high, I want you to divide it into two sections. This low section belongs to kick and bass. And then this high section belongs to the rest. Everything else in your mix. Think of it in terms of kick and bass occupy this, and then all of this belongs to everybody else. It might even be helpful to route your kick drum and your bass to their own bus, and then you think of it as like it's this bus versus the rest of the world. It's a great way to kind of reframe how you think about low end, because nobody else is really contributing to that low end, so you might as well think of those two as kings of the low end. So the secret to solving this imbalance problem is to think of kick and bass as one thing and treat it accordingly. Here's how I think about it. Kick and bass together make a boom sound, so I think of kick drum as being the B-O and bass being the O-M, and together they go boom. The idea is to treat them as one sound. It's a boom thing versus here's a kick drum over here, here's a bass over here. They're always in conflict. They're not in conflict. Just make them into one sound. Let me quickly show you how I like to balance kick and bass on my mixes. So here's a mix of a recent song. This is the drums and bass together. Pay attention to how the kick is all the buh, and then the bass is all the oom. And together they go boom. You see how the kick starts the sound, the kick takes the initiative, and then the bass comes in right alongside it. Let me let you hear those two, just those two together. I like to think of kick and snare at roughly the same volume, and I like to think of kick and bass at roughly the same volume. So when the bass hits and the kick hits, they both, I don't feel like one is greater than the other. What I hear a lot of time on mixes is things like this, where the kick is too weak, or maybe the bass is too weak. Obviously, neither of those makes sense. You want them to be a cohesive unit, joining forces to battle the low end and take no prisoners. Okay, so you get the levels right between kick and bass. You make it go boom. Your job might be done, but it's probably not. Now another problem might emerge. They're at roughly the same volume, but there's a jerk in there. Think of kick and bass as occupying three zones in the frequency spectrum. You've got the low frequencies, you've got the low mid frequencies, and you've got the high mid frequencies. What do each of these do? Low frequencies are responsible for the boom. This is what you feel more than you hear. It's that chest thumping low end that we crave, right? Low mids account for the warmth. And then high mids account for grit on bass. I like a good gritty bass, or snap on a kick drum. Now, of these three, which one is the jerk? I'll tell you which one is the jerk. Low mids are the jerk. Why? Because of mud. 9 times out of 10, if you bring in a bass, it's going to have more low mids than anything else. The solution isn't to crank up the low end anymore. Chances are the low end is there. It's just being covered up by this jerk in the low mid range. I call it the low mid monster. The solution is to turn the low mids down, and that will release the low frequencies so we can hear them more clearly. This is a big unlock for your low end mixes. Okay, here's the EQ on the bass for this song. And you can see I did a cut here at 153. The frequency is typically from 120 up to 200 or so, and it sounds like this. Ian Shepherd calls this range the hooting frequency. It's going goo goo, goo goo goo. And the problem is, this is usually, fun fact, this is usually roughly about an octave up from the actual note being played by the bass player. So if the bass player is going bow, 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 this resonance is happening at bow, 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 bow. I don't understand the math and the science of it. You don't have to understand it either. Just know that that's where a lot of buildup happens. Almost has more energy than the low end. If we pull this down, guess what? We start to hear the low end a whole lot better. Listen for yourself. I've even rolled off the low end because there was almost too much on this bass. But taking out that low mid allowed for the low end to come through. It was glorious. One more thing to consider. Once you get the low end rocking, you may find that somebody else comes in and tries to ruin the party. What am I talking about? Remember how we talked about we divide our tracks up into kick and bass and everything else? Well, the everything else is sometimes going to sneak in. So things like guitars, vocals, pianos especially, they have a lot of low frequency energy sometimes. And if you're not careful, you'll have this beautifully crafted low end with kick and bass, but then once you engage the rest of the tracks, they come in and make everything sound muddy and boomy again because they've got too much low end on them. Let me show you. A good example on this song is the electric guitars coming in with drums and bass. If we listen to our guitar bus, you can see I've rolled off everything below 100 hertz. And if I just disengage this plugin, you're going to notice the guitars go from being like crunchy to being a little more beefy, and that doesn't work in the mix as well. Now, here's an important lesson. Don't be a Pharisee about this. What do I mean? Don't be so strict with the rules that you start to do things because it makes sense on paper and not for what it sounds like. Of course, there will be a little bit of the guitars that makes its way down into the 200, 100 hertz range. That's okay. That's normal. Same with vocals. There's going to be some of that, just like there's going to be some bass guitar and kick drum in the other frequencies. We're talking in generalities, in big terms. It's okay if there's a little bit of crossover between. I'm not talking about a line of demarcation like Dwight at his desk with the ruler. I'm talking about the general gist is below 200 is predominantly occupied by kick, drum, and bass. Above 200, predominantly occupied by other stuff. There'll be a little bit of overlap. You just don't want anybody coming in and ruining the party where there's an excessive amount of low end coming from something other than kick, drum, and bass. By the way, do you want to mix this song? Come take my VIP community for a test drive. You can mix this song plus get a full walkthrough video of how I mixed it from start to finish, including a big, huge thing that happened in the middle that almost ruined the mix. Check it out over at homestudiocorner.com/VIP. All right, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, would you go ahead and do so? Also, if you haven't seen this video on 19 mixing tips I wish I knew a long time ago, check that out next. See ya.